Today we're going to talk about percents and specifically kind of word problems that deal with these percents. Now, the easiest thing that's going to help you is to remember this little phrase up here, which is over of equals percent over 100. Copy that down, all right? Because you will use it a lot with this. For example, let's look at this first one. By the way, you'll also need a calculator today. This says, what percent of 77 is 7? All right, so all we have to do is kind of fill in these different pieces, and then this just turns into a proportion. It is a proportion where we can cross multiply and figure out what the answer is. So the what, of course, we don't know. And it says what percent. So up here, when we don't know something, I'm going to put an X. So instead of the percent, since I don't know the percent, that's going to be an X. Of 77, well, here my 70, or my of is on the bottom, so that's going to be 77 on the bottom. The is 7, that matches up with the is up here, right? And then 100 always goes on that bottom right. Now this just turned into a proportion, which we've been solving for a long time now. So I'm going to multiply these, and you should be able to do most of these in your head. 7 times 100 is 700 equals 77x. Now where you might need a calculator is to actually figure out where the X is. I don't know what 700 divided by 77 is, but if I can type it in quick, 700 divided by 77 is 9.09. Let's round it there as tenth in these. So I'm going to say X equals 9.1. Now, the last thing with each of these problems is you want to make sure, does it make sense? And so if I were to go back and say 9.1% of 77 is 7, does that seem like it would make sense? Is 9.1% of a pretty big number, so almost 10% of 77, is that 7? Well, yeah, I think that makes sense there. So I think it works out. All right, let's try another one. Number 3 says, what percent of 752 is 25? So before we do this one, let's just kind of think, should this be a big number? Should it be a small number? What about this one? What percent of 752 is 25? Well, the of here is kind of a big number. And we're asking what percent is this relatively small number. So we should end up with a pretty small percent. All right, let's try it. The is 25. The of is 752 equals the percent, again, we don't know that, over 100. Cross multiply because it's a proportion. 25 times 100 is 2,500. And then 752 X, or times X. Divide by 752. And X equals 2,500 divided by 752. 3.3. 3.3. Again, we were asking for a pretty small percentage here. And so is 3.3% of 752 going to be 25? Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Let's go a little faster. All right, this one says 95%. This time we know what that percentage is, 95. Of what number? So this time we don't know what the of is. It says of what? So I'm going to put the X where the of goes. This is always a 100, then my is 19. Okay, cross multiply. 19 times 100 is 1900 equals 95x. Divide by 95, divide by 95. X equals 1900 divided by 95 is 20. Okay, now, does this one make sense? 95% of what is 19? Well, do you think 95% of 20 would be 19? Yeah, it's almost the whole thing. And so it makes sense. It's really close to that number. Oh, I'm going out of order. I did 135. Let's go down to number 2. Sorry about that. 60 is what percent of 25? So again, in my is over of equals percent over 100. Let's see. It says 60 is, that's going to be the is. What percent, I don't know, of 25, okay, over 100? Well, this is going to be 6,000 equals 25x divided by 25. Should probably be able to do that one in my head, but I'll use the calculator just to be precise here. 240. 240. Does that make sense? 240. 60 is what percent of 25? Yeah, so here my of. So 60 is way bigger. In fact, if I were to double 25, that's 50, and it's even above that. So it's at least 200%, and it makes sense it's above 200. Or it's above, yeah, 200, it's 240. All right. Oh, I had a typo on this one. 0.5 of, that there's no percent in this. So it should be 0.5%. Sorry about that. 0.5% of, now we can do it. So the percent is going to be up here. That is 0.5 of 490 is what number? We don't know. Always over 100. Okay, cross multiply. You get 100x equals 490 times 0.5. That is 490 divided by 2, which is 245. Don't need a calculator for that one. Divide by 100. Divide by 100. You guys know the tricks with 100. You just move your decimal place twice. It's going to be 2.45. 2.45. Does this make sense? 0.5% of 490 is what number? Well, this is really, really small. 490 is pretty big, so this is still really small compared to your 490. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.